Hello, and welcome back to Uncovered, the channel where we pull back the curtain on the shadows that lurk just beyond our view. In our modern world, we place our trust in uniforms, in badges, and in the quiet figures who stand guard while we sleep. But what happens when that trust is broken? What happens when the protector becomes the predator? Tonight, we delve into a case that shattered a city's sense of security, a story of calculated evil hidden behind a disarming smile. It's a tale of three young women whose bright futures were stolen, and the relentless hunt for a monster hiding in plain sight. This is the story of the Silent Sentinel. Before we begin, if you appreciate our in-depth investigations and want to support our mission to shed light on these important cases, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell. Your support helps us continue to give a voice to the voiceless. Now, let us begin. The city of Oakhaven was a place defined by its quiet predictability. Nestled between rolling hills and a winding river, it was the kind of town where news traveled fast, but there was rarely any news worth traveling. Children rode their bikes on tree-lined streets until dusk, and the biggest headline in the local paper was usually about the annual bake sale or a high school football game. It was a city wrapped in a blanket of perceived safety, a blanket that was about to be torn away, thread by thread. The first thread was pulled on a crisp October evening. Her name was Clara Mayhew. At 22, she was a whirlwind of creative energy, a talented art student who saw canvases in everything from brick walls to fallen leaves. She worked part-time at a downtown diner to pay for her supplies, her shifts ending late into the night. She was known for her infectious laugh and the streaks of paint that always seemed to find their way into her hair. On the night of October 12th, Clara finished her shift at 11 p.m., tied her apron, and told her coworker she was taking the shortcut home through Sterling Park, a route she had walked 100 times before. It was the last time anyone saw her. When Clara didn't show up for her morning class, her friends weren't immediately alarmed. Clara was a free spirit. Maybe she'd stayed up all night working on a project and slept through her alarm. But when calls to her phone went straight to voicemail and she missed her diner shift that evening, a cold knot of dread began to tighten in her roommate's stomach. A missing person report was filed. Detective Miles Corbin was assigned the case. He was a man in his late 40s, with lines etched around his eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights and too many grim discoveries. He had joined the Oakhaven PD 2 decades ago, expecting a career of resolving neighborhood disputes and handing out the occasional speeding ticket. Homicide was a rarity here. A vanishing was even stranger. People don't just disappear in Oakhaven, Corbin said to his younger partner, Detective Eva Rostova, as they pinned Clara's smiling photo to the corkboard in the briefing room. They leave. They run away. They have an argument with their family. But they don't just evaporate. Their initial investigation was a frustrating exercise in dead ends. They canvassed the route from the diner to Clara's apartment. The shortcut through Sterling Park was poorly lit, a known issue that the city council had been debating for months. There were no security cameras along the path itself. They interviewed her coworkers, friends, and family. Everyone told the same story. Clara was happy, ambitious, and had no known enemies. She wasn't involved in drugs. She had no secret boyfriend, no hidden debts. She was just a girl walking home. Days turned into a week. Volunteers organized search parties, combing every inch of Sterling Park and the surrounding woods. Flyers with Clara's face were stapled to telephone poles and taped to shop windows. Her smile, once a source of joy, now felt like a haunting question mark hanging over the city. A quiet fear began to seep into the community's consciousness. Parents started driving their kids to school. Late-night dog walkers began carrying pepper spray. The city's comfortable rhythm was broken. As the investigation into Clara's disappearance stretched into its second week, the unthinkable happened again. Her name was Amelia Vance. A 24-year-old librarian, Amelia was the polar opposite of Clara. Where Clara was vibrant and spontaneous, Amelia was quiet, methodical, and found comfort in the ordered silence of the library she managed at Oakhaven Community College. She lived a life of routine. Work, home, a weekly book club, and caring for her elderly cat. On October 26th, She left the library after a late-night inventory session. Her car was in the shop, so she had called a taxi. Records showed the taxi was dispatched, but the driver reported that when he arrived, there was no one waiting at the designated pickup spot on the campus's deserted west entrance. Amelia's absence was noticed almost immediately. Her boss called the police the next morning when she didn't show up to open the library, an act as out of character for Amelia as the sun failing to rise. Detective Corbin felt a cold dread wash over him as he stood in Amelia's empty apartment. It was neat and tidy, with books stacked in meticulous piles. A half-finished cup of tea sat on the counter. Her cat, Marmalade, meowed anxiously at his feet. There was no sign of a struggle, no note, no indication of a planned departure. Just a life paused mid-sentence. "This isn't a coincidence," Rostova stated, her voice tight. 2 women, similar age, both vanished within 2 weeks. Both disappeared at night, from locations that should have been safe. The press, both local and national, descended on Oakhaven. The story of the vanishing women of Oakhaven was on every news channel. The pressure on Corbin's department was immense. The mayor held press conferences promising swift action, but behind the scenes, the investigation was hitting a wall. The 2 disappearances were eerily similar in their lack of evidence. No witnesses, no forensic trail, no ransom notes. It was as if the women had been plucked from the earth by a phantom. The task force worked around the clock, re-interviewing everyone, re-examining every piece of non-existent evidence. They analyzed CCTV footage from every camera within a 5-mile radius of both locations. They found footage of Clara leaving the diner. They found footage of Amelia locking up the library. And then nothing. In the gaps between cameras, the women ceased to exist. Corbin began to profile the person they were hunting. "This isn't a crime of passion," he theorized during a late-night briefing, his voice gravelly with exhaustion. "This is planned. It's predatory. Our guy is patient, organized, and he knows this city. He knows the blind spots. He understands routines. He hunts in the comfortable, predictable places, turning them into his personal trapping grounds." The fear in Oakhaven had now curdled into a palpable sense of panic. The city that never slept was now a city that was afraid to go to sleep. Halloween was canceled. The streets were empty after dark. The trust residents had in their quiet community was gone, replaced by suspicion and anxiety. Every shadow held a potential threat. Every unfamiliar face was a suspect. The break, when it came, was not the kind anyone wanted. It was early November when a city maintenance crew, tasked with inspecting the storm sewer system ahead of the winter rains, was working near the industrial outskirts of town, miles from where either woman had disappeared. One of the workers, a young man named Leo, descended into a large junction drain, his flashlight beam cutting through the damp darkness. He smelled it before he saw a foul, unnatural odor that clung to the air. He followed the smell to a secondary runoff tunnel, a section rarely accessed. His light fell upon a bundle of cloth and debris snagged on a rebar grate. He moved closer, thinking it was just a pile of illegally dumped trash. As he prodded it with his boot, something pale and horribly familiar was revealed. He scrambled back, his breath catching in his throat, and radioed for his supervisor, his voice shaking. Detective Corbin stood at the edge of the manhole, the grim atmosphere of the scene mirrored in the gray, overcast sky. The medical examiner had already confirmed their worst fears. It was a body, and from the initial description of the clothing, it was almost certainly Clara Mayhew. As they carefully recovered her from the sewer's dark embrace, the full horror of her fate began to settle over the assembled officers. The investigation had shifted. This was no longer a missing persons case. This was a hunt for a killer who was methodical, who was cruel, and who was still out there. Somewhere in the quiet, predictable city of Oakhaven, a monster was watching, waiting, and enjoying the chaos he had created. And they all knew with a chilling certainty that Amelia Vance was likely waiting to be found in a similar, desolate place. The silence that had echoed through the city for weeks had finally been broken by a scream that no one had heard. The discovery of Clara Mayhew's body plunged Oakhaven into a state of collective grief and terror. The abstract fear of a vanisher had been replaced by the concrete horror of a murderer. The media frenzy intensified, with satellite trucks lining the streets outside the police department. Every press conference held by Detective Corbin was a frantic affair, with reporters shouting questions he couldn't yet answer. Who was he? Why was he doing this? And where was Amelia Vance? Corbin's team was now a full-fledged homicide task force, bolstered by state investigators and FBI profilers. The corkboard that once held only 2 smiling photos now became a spiderweb of maps, timelines, and potential connections, however tenuous. The autopsy report for Clara offered few clues. The cause of death was asphyxiation, but the medical examiner found no defensive wounds, suggesting she had been subdued quickly and efficiently. There was no foreign DNA, no fingerprints, no fibers from the killer. He was a ghost. The location where she was found was just as sterile. The storm sewer was a deliberate choice, a place where evidence would be washed away, where the elements would do the killer's work for him. It spoke to a chilling level of forensic awareness. This was not his first time, the FBI profiler suggested. Or if it was, he was a remarkably fast learner. He was what they called an organized killer. He planned his attacks, selected his victims, and controlled the crime scene from start to finish. The profile they built was that of a man who likely held a position of trust or authority, someone who could blend in, who wouldn't raise alarm. He was probably intelligent, meticulous in his personal life, and capable of presenting a perfectly normal face to the world. He lived among them, worked among them, and was hiding behind a mask of utter banality. Every man in Oakhaven became a potential suspect. As the city reeled, the killer struck again. This time, the victim was different. Leanne Cho was a 30-year-old nurse who worked the night shift at Oakhaven General Hospital. She was street-smart, confident, and had taken self-defense classes. She was not, by any definition, an easy target. On the night of November 18th, she finished her grueling 12-hour shift at 7 a.m. and walked to the multi-story employee parking garage adjacent to the hospital. She never made it to her car on the 3rd level. Her husband reported her missing when she didn't come home. The news of a 3rd disappearance sent a shockwave of pure panic through the city. This new victim broke the established pattern. She was older and she was taken in the early morning, not late at night. The location was semi-public, a place that should have been secure. The killer was evolving, growing bolder. He was taunting them. "He's enjoying this," Corbin rasped, staring at Leanne's photo. "He feels powerful." Taking her from a hospital parking garage, a place of healing. The symbolism is deliberate. The investigation into Leanne's disappearance, however, yielded their first real lead. The parking garage was covered in security cameras. While many were old or poorly positioned, one camera near the stairwell on the 2nd floor caught a crucial, fleeting image. At 7:03 a.m., Leanne is seen walking toward the stairs. Seconds later, a man appears in the frame behind her. He is wearing a dark uniform, nondescript and generic. His face is obscured by a baseball cap, but his build is average, and he walks with a steady, unhurried gait. He isn't running or acting suspiciously. He just follows her into the stairwell, and she is never seen again. The uniform was their focus. It looked like a standard security guard's outfit. Corbin and Rostova's teams immediately began compiling a list of every security company operating in Oakhaven and the surrounding counties. It was a monumental task. There were dozens of firms, employing hundreds of guards who worked everywhere from shopping malls and corporate offices to hospitals and college campuses. As they cross-referenced employee lists with geographic profiles of the crime scenes, one company kept coming up: Aegis Private Security. Aegis was one of the largest security providers in the region. They had the contract for the Oakhaven Community College campus where Amelia Vance had disappeared. They had roving patrols in the commercial district near the diner where Clara Mayhew worked. And, most critically, they had recently lost the security contract for Oakhaven General Hospital just 2 months prior. An Aegis guard would know the layout of the hospital grounds and the blind spots in the parking garage's camera system intimately. The task force began digging into every current and former Aegis employee. They were looking for any red flags, prior complaints, disciplinary actions, anything that might suggest a dark side. The work was slow and painstaking. Most of the guards were ordinary people just trying to make a living. It was during this tedious process that Detective Rostova stumbled upon a name: Arthur Penn. He was a 35-year-old guard who had been with Aegis for 5 years. On the surface, his record was impeccable. He had never been late, never had a complaint filed against him. His performance reviews described him as reliable, quiet, and observant. He was a model employee. He was practically invisible. But something about his file bothered Rostova. He had worked at all 3 locations. He was part of the patrol team at the community college during the time Amelia vanished. His patrol route had included the downtown area near Sterling Park. And he had been on the hospital security detail for 2 years before Aegis lost the contract. He had the knowledge. He had the access. Corbin was skeptical. It's circumstantial, Eva. He worked in those places, so did 50 other guards. I know, Miles, she replied. But there's something else. I ran a deep background check, unsealed juvenile records. When he was 17, he was a person of interest in a series of animal cruelty cases in his old neighborhood. Cats and dogs found tortured. They never had enough evidence to charge him, but he was the primary suspect. The case was dropped. It was the piece that made the puzzle darker. A known precursor to violence against humans. Arthur Penn was no longer just a name on a list. He was now their primary suspect. They began quiet surveillance on him. What they found was a man who lived a life of almost monastic discipline. He lived alone in a small, immaculately clean apartment on the edge of town. He had no friends, no romantic partners, no social media presence. His life consisted of work, home, and the gym. He followed the same routine every single day. He was a man who craved order and control. They watched him for a week, hoping for a mistake, a slip-up. But Arthur Penn made no mistakes. He was a creature of habit. The profiler had been right. He wore a mask of absolute normality. The challenge was linking him directly to the victims. They had a blurry video and a strong suspicion, but nothing more. They needed physical evidence. They got a warrant to track his vehicle and his phone. They saw that on the nights of the disappearances, his phone had been turned off for several hours, and his car had not left its parking spot. He was smart. He was covering his tracks. But then they found his other vehicle. A neighbor they interviewed mentioned that Arthur also owned an old, beat-up work van, which he kept in a rented storage unit on the industrial side of town. It wasn't registered in his name. It was a ghost just like him. This was the break they needed. The storage facility was near the sewer junction where Clara's body had been found. Getting a warrant for the unit was their top priority. They knew that whatever was inside that unit would either confirm their suspicions or send them back to square one. As the team prepared to raid the storage unit, a call came in from the city's water department. Another blockage had been reported in the sewer system, this time on the opposite side of town. A maintenance crew had found what looked like another body. Corbin felt his blood run cold. He knew it was Amelia Vance. The killer, their silent sentinel, had used the same method of disposal. But why this timing? It was almost as if he knew they were getting close. Felt less like a discovery and more like a message. He was controlling the narrative, deciding when his victims would be found. The race was on. They had to get inside that storage unit before he had a chance to clean it out. The shadow they had been chasing was finally taking form, and they were about to step into his lair. They could only pray they weren't too late to find Lian Cho, and that the horrors waiting for them inside that cold, metal box wouldn't break them completely. The raid on the storage unit was executed with silent, practiced precision. As the heavy metal door rolled up with a deafening groan, the air that escaped from within was cold and carried the sterile scent of bleach. Detective Corbin, flanked by a tactical team, stepped inside, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The unit was sparsely filled but meticulously organized. On one side, there were stacks of cleaning supplies, large plastic drums of industrial-strength chemicals, and rolls of thick plastic sheeting. On the other side was a large, heavy-duty freezer humming quietly. But the centerpiece of the room was a simple wooden chair positioned directly in front of a video camera on a tripod. The setup was chilling in its starkness. The forensic team went to work, and what they found was damning. The van, parked in the corner, was clean on the inside, too clean. Luminol spray, however, revealed a different story. The cargo area glowed with the ghostly blue traces of blood that had been scoured away. DNA analysis would later confirm it belonged to all three women. Arthur Penn had used the van to transport his victims, confident that his thorough cleaning would erase all evidence. Inside the freezer, they found a collection of horrific trophies. Neatly labeled and sealed in evidence bags were personal items from the victims. Clara Mayhew's paint-splattered bracelet, Amelia Vance's library ID card, and a small, silver locket belonging to Lien Cho. He had kept mementos to relive his crimes. The most disturbing discovery was on the digital camera. Contained a single video file. With a sense of profound dread, Corbin and Rostova watched the footage. It showed Lien Cho, alive but terrified, tied to the wooden chair. Arthur Penn was there, but he never showed his face. He stood just out of frame, his voice a calm, detached monotone as he spoke to her. There was no rage in his voice, no emotion at all. He spoke of order, of control, of how people in the city were chaotic and messy, and how it was his duty to cleanse it, to correct their imperfections. He saw himself not as a killer, but as a righteous enforcer of an order that only he understood. He was the sentinel and they were the transgressions. The video ended abruptly before any physical violence occurred, but the psychological torment was absolute. It was the definitive proof they needed. Arthur Penn was arrested without incident as he left his apartment for his night shift. He showed no surprise, no anger, no fear. His expression was one of mild annoyance, as if the police were a minor inconvenience, a disruption to his perfectly ordered schedule. He remained silent, his compliance a mask for the profound arrogance beneath. The interrogation was a battle of wills. For hours, Penn sat perfectly still, his hands folded on the metal table, deflecting every question with silence or simple, one-word answers. He was a wall of calm, controlled emptiness. He showed no remorse, no empathy. Corbin, frustrated and exhausted, decided to change tactics. He walked out of the room and returned with a small, framed photo of his own daughter. He placed it on the table in front of Penn. "She's 12, Corbin said, his voice low. "She likes to ride her bike around the neighborhood. She believes people are good. She believes she's safe. Clara, Amelia, Leanne. They were all someone's daughter. They believed they were safe too. They trusted the world they lived in." For the first time, a flicker of something crossed Penn's face. Not guilt, but a faint, almost imperceptible curl of his lip. It was contempt. "Trust is a weakness," Penn said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. It was the first full sentence he had spoken. "People are careless. They walk in the dark. They don't pay attention. They break their routines. They create chaos. I was just restoring order." It was the confession they needed, a glimpse into his warped psyche. He saw his victims' small freedoms walking through a park, working late, existing in their own lives' flaws in a system that he felt compelled to fix. His job as a security guard wasn't just a job. It was a calling. He had appointed himself the ultimate arbiter of safety and order, and the penalty for perceived transgressions was death. He didn't kill them in a fit of rage. He removed them as one would remove a piece of trash from a pristine lawn. He then, with chilling detachment, told them where they could find Lien Cho. He had disposed of her body in the foundation of a new building under construction, a place he knew would not be disturbed for decades. He had entombed her in the city's future, a final, arrogant act of control. The trial of Arthur Penn was a somber affair that gripped the nation. The prosecution laid out the mountain of evidence. The DNA, the trophies, the horrifying video, and Penn's own detached confession. He was found guilty on all counts and sentenced to multiple life sentences without the possibility of parole, ensuring he would never threaten another person again. Oak Haven slowly began to heal, but it was a changed city. The blanket of naive safety was gone forever, replaced by a more sober understanding of the world. Memorials for Clara, Amelia, and Leanne were erected in Sterling Park, a constant reminder of the lives lost and the price of vigilance. The community came together, stronger and more connected in the wake of the tragedy. Detective Miles Corbin eventually retired, but the case of the Silent Sentinel never truly left him. It served as a constant, grim reminder that the most terrifying monsters are not the ones who look like monsters, but the ones who wear the uniform of a protector, the ones who smile and nod and hide their true nature behind a mask of perfect, quiet, deadly order. Arthur Penn, the Silent Sentinel, now resides in a maximum security prison, his meticulous routines now confined to a 6-by-9-foot cell. He restored order to 3 lives by ending them, and in doing so, shattered the order of an entire city. The case serves as a chilling reminder that evil often thrives not in the dramatic and the chaotic, but in the quiet, overlooked corners of our daily lives. The greatest danger can be the one you never see coming. Thank you for joining us on Uncovered.